much beyond. Things which actually impact in delivery of your services in cities, things that impact your quality of life, things that impact the economic ability of a city, the way it's able to create employment opportunities for its citizens, or the way it is able to reduce the income inequalities in a city, things that make cities more sustainable, more resilient to pandemics, or more resilient to natural and man-made disasters. So that requires a very strategic approach. It requires a clear roadmap and a clear implementation plan. So as part of this program, the National Urban Innovation Project tries to create that implementation roadmap for basically enabling the cities to perform better, to improve their service delivery that effectively improves the quality of life of our citizens. Now, looking at it, the ministry's deliberations over the last 1 year plus, it came up with three key focus areas that we thought if we actually have clear implementation strategies for those, we would probably be able to improve our governance. It would be probably improve our achievement of the outcomes that we envisage for ourselves. So we focus on three key components. The first being the capacity of our city officials. So how do you build urban capacity? Now, a lot of work that was being done under Smart Cities mission involved technology, and whether if you look at the tier 2, tier 3 cities, even tier 1 cities for that matter, whether they have the people who understand technology, people who understand data, the kind of implementation that's happening. Many a times they become a very vendor-driven initiative. You have a company coming in, pushing in their solutions, their products, but whether that solution or product actually understands the local context, whether it is able to achieve the outcomes that or the aspirations of the people of the city. So there's a big gap in that, and for that you need the right kind of capacity in city officials, in the entire city ecosystem, which is beyond the government, which is the urban stakeholders that we are looking at, be it stakeholders from the industry, stakeholders from the academic institutions, stakeholders from the civic society. So looking at that, you have to basically have an aggregation of the physical component. That means all those institutions that are working in the field of capacity building, the present way of how we are approaching capacity building in cities, and also trying to leverage the cyber technology and basically arrive at a cyber physical aggregation, if you can say. So that was one component that we were looking at. The second component, of course, was how to do more from less using innovation as a strategic tool. And how do you foster innovation in cities? And why it's so important for us in India to basically do things more innovatively, more efficiently is the kind of pressures that we have on our resources and the limited resources that we have available. Now, looking at it, approximately 4,400 urban local bodies and cities are there in India. Now, looking at that, contributing close to around 63 to 65% to the GDP of the country, it's very important to use the resources effectively and efficiently so as to create maximum impact. For that reason, there has to be a more innovative approach to doing things, and that's where innovation is a key component. So how do you foster innovation? What kind of infrastructural elements, the softer and the harder elements that are required, and how does it link to your overall capacity building initiative? And the third piece, probably in this whole enabling ecosystem that we are trying to build, is moving towards a data-driven and performance management system. And that is where you actually leverage all the data that is being generated as evidence for moving towards outcome-based planning or evidence-based planning. And of course, this requires whole institutionalization of a culture of data in cities. So that needs to be done on a very strategic approach, focusing on the people that are required on the ground, the kind of processes that you want to create when you're talking about data with regard to data security, data privacy, and finally, the kind of platforms or technology initiatives that you need to undertake, which tries to create digital infrastructure or digital public goods that the entire ecosystem can reap the benefit from. So I will not take much time because I would like to
Rahul, you just muted yourself by accident, I think.
Oh, thank you so much.
No
So I was
worries.
just saying that I do not want to take too much time in explaining this because I think we should dedicate sufficient time to the Q&A session. And of course, we'd be happy to respond to any of your queries, which goes beyond the RFP, and definitely we'd be getting back to you. So I think, Jeff, we can probably take this off from here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rahul. So what I'll do before we dive into the general Q&A, I'm just going to answer a couple of very commonly received questions. If you do have a question that you want to raise, I ask that you use the raise your hand function, and then we can call on you individually. So a couple of common questions here. Are non-US companies allowed to compete for US TDA grants? In general, or not in general, any company competing for a US TDA grant must be a US company, but that does include US subsidiaries of foreign companies. So, for example, KPMG, Siemens, those are companies who have US subsidiaries and have actually done a lot of work for US TDA. But a company based, for example, based in India that doesn't have a US subsidiary would not be eligible to serve as a contractor for this project. They would, however, potentially be eligible to serve as a grantee on another US TDA grant. And if there are additional opportunities around that any Indian companies here on the phone would like to talk about, I think Manoj and I would be happy to have a conversation with that in the future. Can the grant funds be used to cover taxes? No, the grant agreement is very clear on this. Grant funds provided under the grant agreement cannot be used to pay any taxes, tariffs, duties, or other levies imposed under the laws in effect in India, except for taxes of a de minimis nature. So this is lodging, food, transportation, and airport arrivals and departures. Can the US TDA nationality requirements be waived? If you read the RFP, US TDA grants 80% of the work must be done by individuals in the United States, or individuals who are authorized to work in the United States. The remaining 20% can be done by citizens in the host country, in this case, India. What's important to note there is that with the U.S. requirements, that really just involves individuals who are authorized to work in the United States. So not just U.S. citizens, but those who hold work authorizations as well. Beyond that, USTDA is not able to waive that requirement. That is a very strict requirement that is part of our statutory requirements. And then finally, can the RFP deadline be extended? So this would really be a question for MOHUA. At this point, we don't plan on extending the RFP deadline. This RFP has been open a little bit longer than our normal RFPs, and that is because we wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time for everybody to have ample time to put together a competitive proposal, especially considering the challenges that everybody's facing because of COVID. So we don't plan to extend it at this time. We also, I know that MOHUA has some pretty strict deadlines that they are trying to pursue here, and extending the deadline would be difficult for them. That said, if that is something you would like MOHUA to consider, please do raise that on this call. With that, I see we have our first question from Anuraja Raju.
Hi, good evening, good morning to everybody. This is a great platform. I have never experienced a government organization like ours coming on a virtual. Amazing. People like us can actually make a ripple effect by talking to many people here. I don't know if anybody beyond me are part of this call. Good effort. So my question is, I work for Autodesk. We are looking at how can we participate in such, like as madam mentioned that there were some projects which you have completed. In those projects our design was there already as part of RFP. So how do we reach out to collaborate directly with the government, and then so that there are hurdles are reduced, and then there is more easier and things are this thing. That's my question.
And are you most interested in collaborating with MOHUA or USTDI?
I didn't get you, Phillips. You might have to repeat.
Sorry, is that question directed to the U.S. Trade and Development Agency or Rahul and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs?
That's a good question from your side as well. This question is to Mr. Rahul sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anuradha. So, of course, the scope of this particular RFP for which we have scheduled the pre-bid conference is more on the implementation roadmap that we are looking at. But the kind of engagement that you're looking at from AutoCAD's point of view, that's a separate engagement that we can probably talk about. So you can probably get in touch. My email ID is, of course, there on this RFP as well. So you can probably drop me a mail and then we can probably discuss on how AutoCAD can get more involved in the smart cities mission.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rahul.
Thank you.
The next question I have is from Saibal Chakraborty.
Mr. Saibal, I think you're on mute, or probably we cannot hear you.
I'm sorry. Am I audible now? Is this better? Hi, Rahul. Good to see you there. Look, I'm from Boston Consulting Group. I'm a managing director and partner based out of Delhi. And very, very happy and excited to see this RFP. In fact, the way it has been written, the degree of detail and the amount of thinking that has gone in is truly path-breaking. I think we see very, very few RFPs in the public sector which are this detailed and this well thought through. I have a couple of questions which we had incidentally emailed to you as well, but I will just maybe want to ask a couple of them. It helps if we get the answer over the call. Firstly, we have to submit a bunch of projects as part of our credentials, right? Now, we do have confidentiality agreements with our clients, which limit our ability to disclose some of their names. Now, while we can absolutely provide you a detailed description of the project, the duration, the amount, all of that, everything that is required to satisfy the criteria that you have put forth. And we can get it duly attested by a CA as well. What may be difficult for us in some circumstances is to take the name of the client. So the simple question was, is it possible for us to cite those projects with a detailed description, vetted by the CA, and of course signed and stamped by me, without the name of the client being taken? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Saibal. I think it is possible. However, I think the RFP stipulates that the signing has to be done by the statutory auditor and just not the internal CA of the company. So a statutory auditor's certification would be sufficient to consider your credentials, even if the name of the firm or name of the client is not disclosed.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks. Thank you so much. I did have one more question, if I could, actually a couple more, if I could just quickly go ahead. There is a requirement in section 4.2 of the RFP. First there is a requirement in section 3.6, which is as many as possible, but not more than 6 relevant and verifiable project references must be provided for each of the offerer and any subcontractor, etc. Then I think in section 4.2, there are some specific requirements. So for example, 4.2.5 says specific experience of the firm in implementing at least 2 assignments in the last 5 years in India, etc., etc. So we just want to know which of these two takes precedence, because your scoring criteria suggests that you will score 4.2.1 to 4.2.5. But in section 3.6 also, there is an ask for 6 projects, right? So we just wanted clarity on what to provide.
So the clarification is this, that each of the clauses, you can submit 6 credentials, right? 6 projects. For example, for 4.2.1 and 4. Just let me open it. Yeah. So when you're talking about 4.2.4, wherein you need to submit either either 3 assignments of USD $800,000 or 2 assignments, and then there is 4.2.5. So for both 4.2.4 you can and 4.2.5 you can submit 6 projects each. So it's not 6 for total; it's 6 for each of these.
Would those, naturally
they
some
can
of
be
those
different projects also, or they can be the same projects.
Okay, so we don't need to respond to section 3.6 separately then. We will take cognizance of 4.2.1 through 4.2.5, and
Yes.
we are allowed to provide at least at most 6 projects for each of those sections.
At most 6 projects for each of those, because those projects may be either different or they can be the same projects as well.
Got it. Perfect. I think that's very helpful. And then I think, there's one more question. In your RFP, you have asked very specifically for 7 key personnel, and you have given the profiles as well, right? Like the urban development specialist or the data scientist, etc., etc. And of course, we understand why those roles are critical. But we also have, so for example, within BCG, we do a lot of smart cities work. So there are deep smart city experts who we would like to tap for the purpose of this project. Yeah. So they would have done smart city work in Russia, China, etc., right? So can I include a list of additional experts? Can we include a set of additional experts beyond those 7, or are we restricted to those 7? And if we did include those names, would they be used for scoring? Would that be beneficial in terms of scoring or not?
No, they will not give you any additional benefit in terms of scoring. We are restricting it to the bare minimum 7, so that the playing field is quite level.
Okay, Rahul, I think we may have lost you. Sorry. Can others hear Rahul?
Sorry, I think I just got. Yeah. I've just got back now. So what I was saying is that those additional resources, they can definitely be part of project while it's getting implemented. But for the purpose of evaluation, we will be looking at only these 7 profiles in specific. Can you just, Jeff, I think the Joint Secretary is trying to log in. So just give me a minute. Let me just respond to him on the phone. Okay, it's just sent a message that he's having some technical difficulties and he's not able to join. He's got the link, but some difficulty at his end. Probably he's outside, so no issues. I think we can continue with this. Yeah.
Rahul, actually, if I can just follow up on the point you're just making with Saibal there.
Yeah.
I believe in the RFP, there is an additional section regarding evaluating in 3.4 key staff assignments. I know you're just to be crystal clear here. There is, I believe there are provisions in the RFP for evaluating staff beyond the key personnel, and just wanted clarification as to whether or not those additional personnel that Saibal was talking about in those other sections would potentially help the scoring there, or if that wouldn't be considered. I was pulling up the RFP real quickly to try and find the section. I don't have the exact section in front of me, so sorry about that. But just wanted your quick thoughts on that before we moved on.
So Jeffrey, I think we probably don't have that clause in this particular RFP. Probably it is there. It must be there in some other RFP. But maybe we have removed it from here. But we'll anyway double check and we'll respond to this while we give a formal response to all the pre-bid questions.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Jeffrey, I think one of the reasons why I asked the question is because we received the email on Friday with the clarification on the first set of pre-bid questions, I believe, where I think it has been mentioned that you could add experts beyond the 7 and they would get scored. That's why actually I asked that question, because even I didn't find any reference to that in the RFP, but your pre-bid clarification, which you sent on Friday, seemed to indicate that.
Okay. Well,
that's why the confusion.
Got it. I'm glad you asked that question, so we can update that clarification.
Perfect. So for now, we will assume that the 7 things that the 7 profiles that you asked for in section 4.3, those are the ones on which the 40 marks will be based, right? That's what I'm taking away from this call. Yeah.
Yes, sorry,
unless you issue of further clarification. Yeah.
Yes, once we conclude the pre-bid meeting, then once we have all the queries from all the prospective applicants, then probably we will take a call on that and we will respond in writing.
Sure. I think then the last one from my end was, so, there was another clarification that came in on Friday, and it said that there would be no oral presentation. So I just want to clarify. So in terms of evaluation of the responses, would you purely go through the paper submissions that we make, or is there a plan to interview key personnel or have an oral presentation delivered as well? Just wanted clarification on that.
So at present, we have not kept a provision for having any presentation made by the prospective bidders, but that is a call we may take now that you've raised the point. So I think we'll consider that and see if we want to include it or not. So we'll take a decision on this.
Rahul, that would be just from USTDA's end, that would be a pretty big adjustment for us. So I wouldn't recommend it, but if you do want to consider it further, we can certainly talk about it.
No, actually, we did not envisage keeping a presentation. Very frankly, we did not consider that at this stage. And anyway, we are going to evaluate the proposals based on the evaluation criteria. So for the first component wherein they're supposed to give us an approach note on how they'll be basically submitting their whole concept plan or how they're going to approach this project, that will be evaluated by the evaluation committee, which will be constituted for this. However, if the evaluation committee desires to call for presentations to get a better understanding of the concept plan, probably that can be done, but the overall scoring will only be on the concept plan that is submitted. So the presentation will only be for probably that. Jeffrey, I think would that work? In case the evaluation committee later on decides to call all the qualified bidders for a presentation?
We can, yeah, let me just double check with our legal team to make sure that there are no problems there. But we could probably update the RFP to say something to the effect of qualified bidders may be invited to provide an oral presentation. But
sure.
let me check with our lawyers first, because it's not it would be unusual for USTDA to allow that.
Sure. We will take a call after that, after we do that.
Sure. And while we are verifying that, I just want to also make sure. So there is an element of presentation, of course, which you have said you will clarify. There's also the question around whether the key personnel that we are listing in section 4.3, would there be any interviews, etc. For those? I mean, not all of them may be in the presentation, given that some of them.
Not for evaluation purposes. Not for evaluation purposes.
Okay. Understood. Our humble submission.
At the time of deployment, of course, this is for the qualification purpose, right? But at the time of deployment, when the team is actually working on implementing the proposal or the project, that is the time when we'll actually look at the people who are working on the same, and therein that change of personnel, etc. That aspect can be looked into.
Sure.
So that will come at execution, but for evaluation, it's fairly simple.
Sure. So Rahul, our only submission, the angle we were coming, as BCG, we always prefer having oral presentations and having our key people interviewed, because usually that helps us differentiate. So that's just a humble submission from our end. I mean, we would have our best people from the US lined up for this. So we would definitely appreciate, I mean, I can't speak on behalf of all the bidders, of course, but we would definitely appreciate an opportunity to be allowed to give an oral presentation, and also, have some of the key people interviewed separately or even join the presentation. So that would be just
Sure, we'll take a look at your request. We'll take a look at your request and respond to you. Okay.
Okay. So there are a few other questions, Rahul. I would, I don't want to hog the time, so I will just, stop at this point. But there is a list of questions that we have sent. It would be great if we could get a response to all of them offline. I had a couple more.
I do just want to note that all questions do need to go through that RFP questions@ustda.gov email to make sure that the answers to them are being distributed to everybody who is competing. The deadline for those questions was November 3rd, so this is the last chance for potential for those interested to ask questions. So I do want to raise that here. And Saibal, we can come back to that. I just want to make sure that we're giving everybody equal chance to ask questions here. So maybe we could just open up to the group. If anyone else has some questions, please do raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll come back to some of these other questions. All right, not seeing any other questions right now. Maybe Saibal, if you wanted to ask some of the other questions, we can get answers to those. And I'll keep my eye on the meeting list in case other hands come up.
Sure. Thank you, and I appreciate that. A very quick tactical question. The exact summary that you need, that you have asked for, we will, we are drafting that in MS Word. I'm assuming that the major part of the technical approach, which will run into quite a few more pages, that can be done into PPT, converted into PDF, and then submitted by email, right? This is just a format question.
Yes, for the first criteria, actually, we did not specify any format. Of course, there is a format for the key personnel, and of course, there's a format for the projects, for the eligible projects. But for the approach note, there has been no format specified, of course, except for the fact that they have to be numbered and bound. So I guess that's it. So if you want to submit it along with the PPT or in a format which is like a PPT, that will also work.
Sure. Okay. So the next question, there were a couple of technical questions, having gone through the the very, very detailed section on NUIS and NUIH. We just wanted to make sure that when you are talking about some of these platforms, because this influences our perspectives. So the NUIS platforms, are they envisaged to be full-fledged transactional platforms? So for example, when you talk about Smart Procure, is it actually envisaged to be a procurement platform where people can transact goods and services? Or are these to be more platforms where you share best practices, standards, crowdsourcing innovation, and that? So which of these, or if the answer is that that's a discovery process that needs to come through the assignment, that's fine with us as well. But if you have a direction, that would help us.
Okay, thank you, Saibal. Of course, actually all the platforms that are being envisaged under the NUIS, NUIS is basically the stack on which all these platforms will be built.
Yeah.
So you have, I think right now we have envisaged 7 of them, and the scope can actually be increased. I mean, considering that when you're talking about innovation, when you're talking about capacity building, and when you're talking about data, so you can actually have more number of platforms. But right now over the last 1.5 years, we had actually thought of 7 of these. So when you're talking about National Urban Learning Platform, now this is a platform which is envisaged as a capacity building platform, and this is the virtual component of your capacity building initiative, right? Wherein you can have all stakeholders transacting on it, basically curating courses, having a certification program. It's everything learning on, it's like the Khan Academy of Urban. That's how you are envisaging the NULP. That's the urban learning platform. So when you're talking about smart procure, now this is basically going to be a platform which is currently envisaged as something that can help in procurement of either innovation or procurement of solutions. So when you're talking about basically creating a virtual marketplace for buyers and sellers of ideas to come together and work together. So probably smart procure would be that solution, that platform. So these platforms are actually envisaged to be transactional platforms. So because right now what we are doing is we are doing a lot of capacity building. We have a lot of resources. SmartNet is already existing. Probably there is a reference to SmartNet on that platform, on the proposal, sorry. But SmartNet right now is fairly limited, wherein it's like a repository of a lot of information, but how do you actually get it to the right person, and how do you make it more transactional? That is currently a challenge or limitation of the existing platform. And what this strategy is envisaging to do is actually create something which is more impactful, more transactional. So yes, definitely it is more transactional. But of course, it is completely open to the prospective bidders to think out of the box, look out of the box, because whatever we have thought of here in the ministry, maybe we have been limited by our resources that are surrounding us. I don't know. So we would be very open to any other approach in doing this thing better. So that would also be welcome. Anything more innovative, maybe more impactful. Yeah.
Understood. Understood. I think part of that question is also based, Rahul, on the fact that we don't necessarily want to duplicate structures and institutions or platforms that may already exist in the government where a similar activity is being conducted. Hence that question had come up.
Definitely. In fact, we would like that if we can leverage existing resources which are already there. So that's why when I was talking about the cyber physical aggregation, so if there's an existing platform which we can borrow and we can probably leverage, maybe a state government has done something which can become part of the national initiative and all other states and all other cities can make use of. So why not? So that can definitely be a part of the strategy.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay, then one last tactical question from my side. I think, one of the objectives in Annex 1, terms of reference, says develop detailed implementation roadmaps. That is one of the objectives of the program. Just want to make sure that, a lot of the platforms that we are developing the design for, they will go through pretty complex RFPs, right? They could be RFPs for managed services providers who will run those platforms, RFPs for product vendors who may need to be brought on board. I'm assuming this phase of the program that we're talking about right now, does not include preparation of detailed RFPs, consultation with vendors, or anything of that sort. It's more of a to-be state design and implementation roadmap, right? Not preparation of RFPs or any stage of procurement at all.
So you can probably say that this is the DPR stage. So you're preparing a detailed project report, and once this DPR is finalized, after that, the next phase would be actually preparing the bid document, which is the RFP, to put it in simple terms. And yes, preparation of that RFP is currently not part of the scope of this assignment. This is mainly the implementation roadmap, which is the detailed project report. So you actually look at each of the components or each of the pieces. So from legal angle, from technical angle, from financial angle, how do you implement the data initiative, or how do you implement the capacity building piece? So talking about the details, that's what the whole assignment is about.
Got it.
But not preparation of RFPs.
Got it. Thank you. I think that's very, very clear. So I really appreciate the extended time given. I did not have any further questions. I think the RFP is very detailed and self-explanatory. So thank you for that. I think there was some discussion around extension of the timeline. I'm assuming, if there is an extension of the timeline, would we get to know about that in the next, let's say, 24 hours or so? Given that
it all depends on how many people are actually keen on seeking an extension. Secondly, whether they have sufficient reasons to seek an extension. We will be looking at both those factors. So if any of the participants in today's pre-bid meeting would like an extension, then they may say so. And secondly, of course, there has to be good enough reason, because we are already pushed quite far behind on the timelines with regard to this project. So, the normal circumstances, we would not have considered this, but if there is sufficient demand and sufficient ground, then maybe we will take a call. But I am not going to give any assurance that we will extend. We will not. That is the current stand of the ministry. But we will definitely consider if there is sufficient reason for it.
Yeah. Just to be clear, then to put it on record that we as BCG are not asking for an extension. We are okay to submit by the 16th.
I would like to turn it over to Sam Reimer now, who's been waiting patiently with his hand raised. Sam, please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for hosting this. It's actually a very helpful session. So my first question is on the capacity building side. Oh, also I am from the Deloitte US firm. So looking at the RFP and the different components, I can't agree more to your earlier statement, Rahul, that your infrastructure is only as good as how you build your human capital around it. So we definitely understand the impetus for that being part of this pursuit. Obviously, it's always preferable to aim for reskilling of resources that are already in place, that already know the lay of the land, than it is to do, net new hires. But does the government of India feel that the resources that they have in place in the cities have the capacity to be reskilled? Or are we looking more at a lot of net new hire, net new onboarding, net new skilling there?
So, of course, basically, the current way things are getting done, it requires a lot of new skills in addition to reskilling. That is something that we need to look at. And then we also don't want everyone to be inventing the wheel. So if you're talking about 4,400 cities, and if everybody decides to create their own platforms for technology, have their own capacity building programs, and basically trying to get their own manpower. And that's what we talk about, this whole stack approach, like you have a horizontal, which all these verticals can draw upon. So we are trying to build that horizontal layer. And once that horizontal layer is there, then you can probably use that or leverage that instead of trying to create everything on your own. So yes, today you do require certain resources which are not inherent in the city. For example, if you're talking about a data scientist or a data analyst, then probably a city might not be having that kind of a resource and would probably be looking outside its systems or organizations to get that kind of a resource. Maybe it can be a partnership with an academic institution or with the industry that can help in augmenting that kind of capacity in the city. Second is skilling in terms of existing core works that the city is doing. So, for example, if you're talking about water supply, and there are some improvements or new technologies being brought in a water supply management system, then probably you can look at upgradation of skills of the existing resources there. So you cannot have one size fits all. So when you're talking about the urban capacity building piece, you'll actually have to create this kind of a network which is able to meet the demands for each and every city, which can be very unique, which can be very context specific. A city may have a requirement for let us say water management, and its energy systems are pretty good or efficient. So probably from the capacity building piece, it may be demanding something more on water management, right? So the kind of platform that we are trying to build or kind of ecosystem that we want to have on capacity building should be able to give that kind of it's like a buffet approach. You can just take what you want instead of a very supply driven approach to capacity building, which we have today, wherein we have discourses, we have webinars, we have conferences, we have material which we circulate on a particular subject, but maybe that's not what the city is demanding. So how do you build that kind of an ecosystem is what the whole objective of the study is.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And so for the areas where you feel that there may be gaps, like around the data scientist piece, are you weighting those key personnel then more heavily than the others as a result of the need, or are they all being, just evaluated at the same level?
So, like I mentioned, cities are a different level of maturities, and there's a different level of understanding, comprehension. First thing is that how do you create the demand? So for that also, there's a bit of capacity building that's required, right? So it's
Mhm.
like a problem which is like a virtuous cycle that you're looking at. I don't know whether you address the demand side or the supply side. So if you're talking about data scientists and whether we are going to look at that as this, as whether it will be the same level of priority for city A and city B. So no, it's not going to happen. Probably city A has already got existing capacity with when it comes to data. It's already data mature. There are assessment frameworks that we in the ministry are trying to do with regard to data maturity. So that way you do understand that where do you stand today. So similarly, there are efforts like the climate assessment framework that the Smart Cities mission has done, which helps cities self-evaluate and self-assess where they are in terms of climate maturity. So according to these assessment frameworks basically help you understand where you are, what kind of gaps exist in your ecosystem. So that's why you need to have a very strong data and performance management piece. Performance management helps you understand your gaps. And after that, the capacity building piece basically helps you in fulfilling those gaps. And innovation helps you in implementing the solutions in a more efficient and effective manner. So that's how these three things are interrelated in the whole study.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then my last question, we've received a lot of information from our team on the ground there around the 100 Smart Cities initiative. And it sounds like, at least for the initial phase, it's targeted more towards an initial 20 cities. So when we're looking at, for example, the offices of innovation and some of the elements of the organization design, are you thinking that it'll be more focused on those 20 cities, or it'll probably be rather more expansive than that?
Of course, what we want to do is when we are talking about 20 cities, so these need not be the same 20 cities that qualified in the first round of selection of Smart Cities mission. I mean, you have to create an innovation assessment framework and really understand that where cities stand in terms of innovation maturity. If you're talking about data maturity, then probably there is something called an innovation maturity, wherein maybe a city like Haridwar, where there's a lot of industrial activity happening right now, and there are certain institutions. And how do you basically foster innovation in that region? How do you promote startups? So probably that city might be something that might be a city that you would want to select as part of your strategy. So that's completely open. And whether it's 20 cities or whether it's 100 cities, I mean, obviously 4,400 innovation zones is not something that would be very prudent, but I don't know, someone can give a suggestion like that. So we leave it completely open. We had thought of maybe if we start with 20, these 20 becomes a replicable model. You can probably pilot something in a period of 3 years, and after that, from those learnings, you can probably scale it up to another 40 and another 40, and maybe take it up to 100. But then that scale up strategy is again something that we need to detail out, and that is the kind of the work that will be done under this assignment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, with that, it's been an hour. Rahul, do you have any concluding comments for the group?
No, the only comment would be that we are really hoping for very active and enthusiastic participation. This is a great opportunity to not only basically deliver something, but also be a part of a journey. And it's going to be a very rich experience for those who participate and actually engage in this whole project. It's a project which is very different from any other kind of assignments that you normally do undertake, and probably the whole journey of implementing it in the next few months would be very enriching and would be a great opportunity for you to know what urban India is all about and basically contribute in the urban transformation story of India. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. Leave it at that. The recording of this will be made available shortly. You just need to request that through the USTDA RFP email. We'll also be providing a readout of this discussion as an amendment to the RFP. One final reminder that the bids are due at 12 p.m. India Standard Time on November 16th. And thank you again, Rahul and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. USTDA is very excited to be sponsoring this grant. And good luck to all the potential bidders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day and good night. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. This was a great session.